Welcome to the Pharmacy Inspection Podcast, where we discuss topics related to sterile and non-sterile compounding pharmacy in an effort to promote compliance and increase quality. The Pharmacy Inspection Podcast is a member of the Pharmacy Podcast Network, delivering quality and meaningful conversations and discussions about our pharmacy industry and the critical role pharmacists play in our healthcare systems. Learn more at pharmacypodcast.com. Please welcome your hosts, Brian Prince and Seth DePasquale.
This podcast is being brought to you by Encore Scientific. With over 70 years of combined experience, the Encore team is able to provide the highest quality chemicals, bases, equipment, and consulting services at the lowest possible cost to your pharmacy. Please visit them at encoresci.com. That's ENCORESCI.com, or by phone at 800-454-2304. and discover the benefits of a relationship with Encore Scientific. Once again, encoresci.com or call 800-454-2304. Mention this ad that you heard it on the Pharmacy Inspection Podcast and receive 20% off your next order. So today we have with us a pharmacist, Donnie Calhoun, who is the CEO and Executive Director of the American College of Apothecaries. We first got in touch with Donnie at the ACA event in Florida a couple weeks ago, and we tried to record a podcast, but there was a lot of background noise, so we're going to re-record it today. So, Donnie, tell us a little bit about yourself and your start in pharmacy, and then moreover into anything you've done within compounding pharmacy, and what led to you getting into ACA.
Thanks, Seth. I'd be more than happy to. Well, as you said, I'm a pharmacist. I also own a pharmacy in Anniston, Alabama. I started my career graduating from Sanford University way back in the good old days, 1987, so I'm kind of dating myself there. And I went into retail pharmacy right away. I worked for a regional chain here in Alabama, and bought my first pharmacy in 1991. And over the years, I've owned a multitude of different pharmacies in different locations. I had home infusion company. I had DME locations. At one time, we had 68 employees, a home office, a warehouse. I was a nursing home consultant. Like I said, we did home infusion. I've done just about anything you can do in pharmacy. In 2012, we decided to go into wellness pharmacy. So we sold our last retail pharmacy and opened up a compounding clinical community pharmacy practice. I've been doing compounding since 1992. If you think about what I just said, I bought my first pharmacy in 91, so a year later I started compounding. And we did it based on patient need. We had a doctor call up with a problem. A physician had a patient that had a problem pregnancy and had a couple of miscarriages. And lo and behold, we did progesterone suppositories, and her little girl is 30-something years old now. So very great outcome. And we went from there. And, everything that we've done in compounding has always been based on patient need. But, during the course of owning all these pharmacies, got involved in pharmacy politics and got involved in advocacy for our profession, especially for independent owners. We were facing a lot of issues over those years, PBMs being the number one. So I got involved with our state association. From our state association, NCPA, became NCPA president in 2012 through 2013. And during that time, I also served on the State Board of Pharmacy in Alabama for about 5 years. So I've been really engaged in our profession ever since I graduated. I had a pharmacy professor that said, no one really cares about pharmacists except pharmacists. And if you don't fight for your profession, nobody else will. So I took that home, and I've been practicing that ever since. I got involved with ACA. Basically, the former executive director, Dr. Ed Hesterly, retired, and they had a nationwide search, and I had a friend to suggest I apply for it because he knew my passion for pharmacy and our profession and what we do each and every day. And lo and behold, I never thought they'd offer me the position, but they did. And I've really enjoyed doing the job for ACA, and I've been on the job almost 2 years now, and I wouldn't trade it for anything. It's a great opportunity, for me to get out there and work full time for the profession and trying to make a difference in pharmacy owners and pharmacists' lives across the country.
My favorite part of the podcast series is when we always start off and we get to hear the history of our guests and the experience that they bring to the table, because I think for me, I love hearing the interesting stories. So where we want to steer this conversation is more towards education. And one of the reoccurring themes, Donnie, that we have had in weeks past over and over is that of education. And education is being a driver in our compounding industry. And even when we were listening to the guest panel at the ACA conference there in Ponte Vedra, that recurring theme kept coming up over and over as well. So tell us, what are your thoughts on education as being a major driver for the future of this business? And then also, I guess, tell us how the ACA can help contribute to that as well.
Thanks, Brian. Education has been a big part of my life. I graduated from college with a degree in biology, went back to pharmacy school, started a PharmD program, so I've done a lot of things in education. In our industry, when you look at what's happening across the board in pharmacy today, it's all about quality. It's all about making sure that people that are compounding are qualified, whether it be the facility, whether you're accredited or not, and the person. I think as you see consolidation in the marketplace of the chain pharmacies, we've all seen that, right? The latest acquisition, Albertsons buying the Rite Aid stores, and of course with PBMs, you seeing, I think, Caremark buying Aetna. So there's a lot of consolidation going on, and why is that? It's all about, I think, the quality, and to be able to say we've got some of the best programs out there. We want to make sure that the things we're doing meet a high standard. And, of course, we all know that when we get those contracts that say we want you to be credentialed, tell us what those are. I just don't see us continuing to go forward with the regulators, with all the things coming down from USP, from FDA, and from the government, boards of pharmacy and others, that we're going to be able to just practice with a pharmacy degree. I'm a RPH. I mentioned that, went back to school for PharmD, and gives you an extra year clinical practice. And you're starting to see out in the marketplace now where there are networks being formed for clinical services in the community setting. More and more pharmacists are working in clinical services in hospitals, in physician practices across the country. So education is going to become more and more and more important if you want to move ahead as a pharmacist. And I do believe getting those extra credentials is really going to set people apart in our profession. One of the things that was really stressed to me early in my career was continuous professional development, where you should always be striving to better yourself day in and day out, with what you do each and every day. If you were a carpenter, you can be a basic apprentice, you can be a level 1 carpenter, but it takes you years to become a master carpenter. Well, you got to think about pharmacists the same way. Get out of pharmacy school, you're really not an apprentice, but you are a beginner. But it takes you a long time to become that master pharmacist. So I think as we're going to have more and more pressure put on our profession by the regulators and by the government and by payers and also by patients, patients are going to start demanding that the care they receive are from the very best providers that are out there. And that needs to be, our people. That needs to be pharmacists who want to be that master pharmacist and get those credentials that they need. The ACA has been around since 1940. ACA is a best practice organization. When it was started with four basic fundamentals: education, training, entrepreneurism, and mentoring. And the reason for that is you can get all the training in the world, all the education in the world, but if you don't have a mentor, it's probably not going to help you a whole lot. And if you don't have a little entrepreneurial spirit, it's not going to help you a whole lot either. So you've got to have those four core tenets to be that master pharmacist. And that's what ACA was started about in 1940, is for an organization to help pharmacists have the very best practice that they could have. And if they have the best practice, odds are they're going to be very, very successful people. And we've seen that over the years with a lot of our members. ACA is, I think, especially suited to help pharmacists with that postgraduate education. Once pharmacy school's over, where do you get training in compounding? Where do you get training in clinical services? How do you learn how to take people off proton pump inhibitors? ACA is where you can get that. ACA, we work with college professors, pharmacy school professors. We work with clinicians. We work, with pharmacists who have years and years and years of experience, who are those master pharmacists, to share their experiences and help people learn how to create new programs to help them increase their ROI and their bottom line. So I think ACA is perfectly suited, to help people, with what's coming down the pipe in education for pharmacy.
Donnie, where do you see the field of compounding going with all of the, like you mentioned, regulations and FDA involvement more and more, and not only that, not only where you see that going, but you just mentioned a whole bunch of things that ACA does in terms of education. How do you see ACA positioned to bring compounding pharmacy to the next level, or maybe the next 5 years of what's to come? First of all, where do you see that going, and how is ACA positioned to assist with that?
Thanks, Seth. That's a great question. So, we all wish we had a crystal ball, right? But just trying to read between the lines with what we're seeing coming out of USP. Got a lot of great people that volunteer to work for USP and try to do the right thing to make our practice the best it can be. But one of the things we all have to remember is USP guidelines and standards are minimum. Think about that for a minute. Minimum standards, and most of us in the profession fuss about them, how strenuous they are and how hard they are to comply with. Well, I don't think they're going to get any easier. In this age of technology, with smartphone technology, computer technology, robotics, everything else that's out there, I think the demand on humans, pharmacists and healthcare providers in particular, is going to just grow and grow and grow. FDA, of course, with compounding, is going to create new programs. I believe they released guidance documents for smaller pharmacies to encourage them to become 503B providers. So we're going to continue to see scrutiny on the compounding side of the pharmacy practice. For me, compounding has always been the art of pharmacy. That's where pharmacy came from. 5,000 years ago, the apothecary was the village healer. And from that apothecary, you got physicians, podiatrists, dentists, pharmacists. You got everybody out of that one person who was the apothecary back in the day. Well, now governments dictate what that person and those persons can do to help patients. So we all have to be prepared for that. We can't wait and be reactive. We all need to be more and more proactive. So I don't think the rules are going to get any easier for compounders. And one of the reasons for that is, as I said earlier, USP is the minimum standards. State boards of pharmacy who give us our licenses and our permits to own pharmacies, they're going to require more and more documentation of proof that you're qualified to do the things you want to do. For instance, in Massachusetts, they're requiring pharmacies that do veterinary compounding to prove they've had veterinary compounding training. So I can see that spreading all over the country. If you do pediatric compounding, show us your proof that you're qualified to do pediatric compounding. And no, your diploma from your College of Pharmacy is not good enough anymore. So I can see those kind of things coming down the pipe. So for ACA, I think we're perfectly suited for that. I like to tell people I want to peek around the corner as to what's coming down the road. I don't want to stick my head out because, you stick your head out sometimes you can get hit, So I don't want to do that. I just want to peek really quick and stick my head back so that we can try to kind of gain an insight as to what we believe the future is going to hold so that we can start preparing to come out with programs that can help people, be ready for those regulations and for those new standards and help them prepare for that future that we see coming. And we do that by a variety of ways. As I mentioned earlier, we've got lots and lots of different instructors that we work with day in and day out to come up with these programs. But we also attend a lot of meetings. We listen to a lot of webinars and podcasts, and we read a lot to try to find out what the future might hold. So ACA is one of the organizations, it's one of the few organizations, that really and truly dedicates most of its time just to education and training. We don't do really advocacy. We support our sister organizations like NCPA and IECP and APHA and others who champion, on Capitol Hill with Congress and in the state legislatures for laws and regulations that can benefit our members and community pharmacy in general. But we leave that to others to do. And so we primarily try to focus on ways to help the pharmacy and the pharmacist improve the return on their investment. So that investment could be their pharmacy, it could be their education. We want them to have the best possible practice they could have, and that's why I think ACA is the organization best suited, for community pharmacy in that area.
So just thinking about technicians, to me, those are the people on the front line. Those are the people that are, knee deep into the process, into the powder, into the clean rooms. They're the people that are there. Does the state board not have any current regulations? And I guess it would be almost state to state that says, listen, if you've got a technician that is operating at this level, whatever level that is, that they have to be a CPHT. And then on top of that, to be a CPHT, you also have to have so many continuing education credits. See, I don't know that part of the business, but I'm just kind of curious. What is there anything that keeps the brand new 1 week technician from being any different than the 1 year or 10-year technician? Because I remember it was probably, I don't know, so many episodes ago, Bill Mixon made a comment that the pharmacist in the clean room who's been there for 1 week, there's no distinction between one that's been there for 10 years. And so I'm thinking to myself, okay, if we don't have these distinctions, whether they're pharmacists or whether they're technicians, what is it truly that we're looking at right now from an education standpoint?
Brian, that's a great observation, and I've had that same observation. So I'll just give you a couple of outtakes on that, I guess. One is PTCB. I attended a symposium that PTCB, Pharmacy Technician Certification Board, had in Dallas last year. PTCB is doing everything they can to try and raise the requirements for technicians to be certified in every state. And as you mentioned, laws and regulations vary from state to state because it's the State Board of Pharmacy that gives us our license and our permission to practice in their state. So it all has to be driven from a board level. Some boards of pharmacy require technicians to go the extra mile, to take some type of education, to take some kind of training, pass an exam to prove that they're capable of doing certain things. Idaho, for instance, has a level 2 technician. Level 2 technicians in Idaho can take oral prescriptions over the telephone. You can't do that in Alabama. In Idaho, if they go through this training program that's approved by the Idaho board, technicians in Idaho can do that. So there's a lot of things going on in states right now with technicians. Some states don't even register technicians. It's up to the pharmacy. The state board says we register the pharmacist and the facility, and it's the pharmacist's responsibility for everything that happens in there, so they're responsible for the techs, so we're not going to register them. And there are a couple of states out there that are like that. So you have a lot of different laws, a lot of different states require different things. But I do believe that eventually technicians are going to rise up to the point where they're going to have additional training to do certain things, whether it be work in a radio pharmacy, someone that does nuclear medicine, whether they work in a compounding pharmacy, a veterinary pharmacy, wherever they might work, they're going to have specialized training. Technicians already have specialized training in most cases. If you work in a veterinary pharmacy, your technicians are going to be pretty much trained on veterinary pharmacy. They just are not going to have a certificate that says they've had that training. So I think that's another place that ACA really fits in. We do some of those type trainings, and we're working on plans now to come out with some accreditation standards for pharmacists and technicians in the future, so that you can have a different distinction with your license to say, I've gone through this process, and now I've taken a national exam. I've been accredited to be able to do this. There is the Board of Pharmacy Specialties that's out there that offers 8 different board specialty programs for pharmacists to take. Probably 95% of the pharmacists that have completed those programs work in hospital settings. They don't have a lot of programs currently for community pharmacy. But I do believe that having that extra credential is probably going to be required somewhere down the line. As you mentioned, Bill said that there's no difference between a guy at a school for 1 year and a guy that's been doing it for 30 years. There's going to have to be a distinction somewhere in there about the training. And I think more and more boards are going to be looking at that and looking at what your credentials are. And I think Massachusetts, as I mentioned earlier, is probably one of the first states to start requiring that. I just think we're going to see more and more states coming in to require that. But the problem is you've got these people that have been doing it for 20 years. It's going to be hard for them to go back and go through school all over again. That's always been the big hang-up whenever there's a big mind shift in the profession, when you go from one type of training to another. There's been that big gap. Well, you grandfather everybody in? Do you not grandfather everybody in? And if you think back a little bit, that's what happened when we went from the BS pharmacy degree to the PharmD pharmacy degree. Similar type thing is happening now, I believe, when it comes to technicians and also to pharmacists, because just because you graduated pharmacy school doesn't mean that you're a veterinary pharmacist. I mean, you got to go through a lot of extra training to get that expertise to be able to take care of animals.
Donnie, in wrapping all of this up in one pretty bow, do you have any final advice for our listeners, or anything that you just want to share that we haven't necessarily asked you about?
Gosh, your podcast's probably not long enough for that. One of the things that I guess I'll say is that, pharmacists and technicians, if you're going to be involved in this profession, you need to have a continuous professional development program for yourself. What do you want to achieve? Do you think about what you do each and every day as a profession, or do you think of it as just a job? I mean, and I've met pharmacists who think that what we do is just a job. Believe it or not, I've got technicians that think what they do is just a job. But for me, anytime you make a difference in a patient's life, then that's a profession. It's more than just a job. And we have an obligation to take care of those people that come in our doors each and every day. That's why we're pharmacists. That's why we're technicians, because we want to help people. So, for me, I think what I'd like to say is, don't give up on your training. Don't give up on your education. Take that webinar. Take that home study program. Go to a meeting. Meet new people that are involved in your profession that may be doing things that you're doing, maybe doing things you're not doing. We learn by communicating, and we learn from others. Remember I mentioned the master carpenter and the apprentice, hey, if you're out of school for a year, find a master carpenter so you can apprentice with them for a little bit. Find a mentor that you can call and ask questions. That would be the advice I'd give anybody. You're never too old to learn. I mean, look at me. I learn something new every day. And when people ask me, well, don't you get tired of doing that? I'm going, look, if you're not learning something every day, then what are you getting up for? We learn something whether we want to or not each and every day. And so why not learn something that you can put to use in helping people? So that's what I like to leave with.
It's great advice. It's just to go off on that a little bit. The thing is that I didn't really start out in compounding as a pharmacist, and I had to find my way into it. And you're right. Even myself along the way, I did see myself in jobs rather than as a professional, and some better than others, but at this point, I've refocused, and I think a lot of that stuff kind of comes in waves. Sometimes you might be in what you kind of think is a job, but the difference there, and you touched on this really well, is that continual learning throughout your career. And I think that's what really has honed it in for me and locked it in on compounding. So, yeah, it's great advice.
Thanks.
Absolutely. I will echo Seth's sentiment there. And it's funny because I think we're going to have to get a new banner printed up. But our official motto of this, it is typically like raising the bar, but it's really, you don't know what you don't know. And the only way that we're going to know is when we get together at these conferences and we get to talk back and forth, we get to collaborate. Some of the conversations, see, I'm an outsider in this business. And so I'm always learning something new. And even when people, Brian is an expert, I'm like, no, with an expert. I am a lifelong student. I am continuously dumping information into my mind, into my brain, because I'm always trying to play catch up or make sure that I'm bringing value to this industry. So I love the fact that you said, you know what, we've got to learn something new every single day. That resonates in my heart. So, Donnie, again, we appreciate you joining us on the Pharmacy Inspection Podcast. We hope to have you again sometime in the near future. But again, I guess, hey, we'll probably see you at Compounders on Capitol Hill in about
Absolutely. Looking forward to that. And again, thank you, Seth. Thank you, Brian, both for having me as a guest and letting me talk a little bit about the profession and especially ACA. It's a great organization for anyone out there. Give us a look. It's acainfo.org. We're there to help. So give us a ring and let us see what we can do for you.
And now a special thanks is extended from Seth and I to Encore Scientific for sponsoring the podcast series that was recorded at the ACA's annual conference. Encore Scientific is a manufacturer and distributor of high-quality, compendial-grade raw ingredients, buffers, solutions, lab equipment, lab supplies, and ready-made topical bases to lots of industries that include the pharmacy, cannabis, R&D lab, nutraceutical, and personal care markets. Discover how a relationship with Encore Scientific can make your life and company more successful and less stressful by visiting EncoreSci.com. That's EncoreSci.com, or calling them direct at 1-800-454-2304. And as well, I'd like to extend a special thanks out to you, to all of our listeners who join us week after week. Thank you so much. And until next week, keep raising the bar.